That's right. Okay, that's the funny area. David's not here yet. We're all practice.
We need big rooms for big ideas. I hope.
Let's get a small room. It'll warm up quicker. It's just pretty fucking cold in here right now.
Yesterday, I grabbed my black sweater on the stage. So I'm like sitting in equipment, it's freezing. I'm putting on house. Not my WebTransport happens. I think it's fun.
You just gotta be lighter.
I tend to not be alarmed.
No, yeah, they don't schedule web transport right after lunch anymore. They've learned their lesson. Do we have the clicker doing the clicking? Or... Oh, sweet. Whoa. Nice. I think we can get started. All right, go for it.
Let's get started. So welcome to WebTransport at IETF 122. This session is being recorded. Make sure that you've signed into the Meet Echo room. You'll need that to join the queue, and it also helps us to ensure that we get a big enough room next time. You can join the queue with the hand icon, and if you're remote, you can unmute yourself and use the video using the camera and mic icon. So this is the IETF Notewell. Please make sure that you've read it and fully understand its implications, especially those regarding prompt disclosure of any IPR that you might be aware of. Also note that we operate under a code of conduct. Any concerns can be reported to the working group chairs, the responsible AD, or the ombuds team. And here's a link to our agenda and the notes. And we have 2 new chairs, Lucas and me, this time joining David, who will be stepping down after this meeting.
Before we continue, can I have a round of applause for them? This is work. Thanks both of you for joining on.
And now I'm looking to see if there's any note takers in the room, that we can have any volunteers for that. Okay, thank you. Let me hand it off to you.
All right. Next slide. So, as most of you know, up until very recently, Bernard Aboba was chair of the WebTransport working group. He was there from the very beginning, from the BOF. He's been an IETF member for decades. And I wanted to share a quick story of the first time I met Bernard. We were talking about doing a BOF for WebTransport, and once the director, Barry at the time, selected Bernard and I as chairs, we set up, oh, well, we should meet. Okay, let's meet at the break at this time. I think it was in Singapore. And on my way there, I was like, Bernard Aboba, this name sounds familiar. I don't know why. And so I racked my brain, and I found that back when I was in school, I was studying networking, and one of the courses, we looked at RFC 5218, which was an RFC that kind of describes what makes a successful protocol that Bernard had co-written while he was on the IAB. And it does some case studies of various protocols and saying like, oh, this one was wildly successful, and kind of isolating, trying to find out why. It was really, really interesting. Our professors had us like do case studies of our own. It was a great way to learn. And I mentioned this kind of as when I first met him, and his answer, deadpan, was, oh, yeah, I wrote that on the IAB to demonstrate that all the great protocols came from outside the IETF. And I thought that was great. Bernard knew the importance of what we do, knew that what we do matters, but still could take it lightly and always with pragmatism. So if you could join me in a little bit of silence to remember Bernard, and let's do that, please. All right. Thank you, everyone, and thanks to Bernard. We'll always remember him fondly. And now for something completely different, our agenda. This is the agenda. Does anyone want to bash the agenda? All right, then. Will, are you online?
I think I am. Yes.
Can you hear me? All right. Okay. Do you want to control the slides, Will? We can hand over control to you.
I can just say next, if that's okay.
Yeah, that works.
We have 8 slides. There's no animation, so I'll just do that. So good afternoon to Bangkok. My name is Will Law from Akamai. I co-chair the W3C WebTransport working group along with Yanivar Brewery from Mozilla. It's 3 a.m. for him. He is soundly asleep. He sends his regards. And I will be presenting on the group's behalf today. And many of the people involved in this group are in the room. So I realize for some of you, it's a summary you already know about, but this is to catch up the rest on progress. So as progress since the last time we presented to IETF, working draft has progressed to a version from 12th of February. We're actually due for a release on that pretty soon. Our charter got extended to the end of this year. We've published a timetable for release. We're really hoping to complete the WebTransport spec and get it out. We need to go to candidate recommendation in the next month or two. That is a hard target for us. The milestone status, and we're tracking the candidate recommendation. We have 9 open PRs on that. We've 6 of them are ready, rather, and 9 open issues. So we're close to being complete. We just need the work to be done. We have a face-to-face meeting coming up in Kobe in November. And at that point, we hope to be well down our release process. Next slide, please. Summarize some of the major decisions and updates since the last time we presented. So redirection treated as a network error. So right now, any 3XX, 5X, or any 3XX essentially is going to be indistinguishable from any other network error. This is in line with guidance from the IETF side of WebTransport. We've also added a new Boolean flag in our stats called @sendCapacity. This is to help interpret the value that is being returned by another stat, which is estimated send rate. So a value of false indicates that you might be application limited. In other words, you're not sending enough data to make an accurate estimate of the available throughput. A value of true indicates the application is sending enough data. And therefore, maybe you can trust your estimated send rate to be a true upper ceiling of what you may be able to send. It's not ideal. There was much debate on this, but this is the solution we resolved at the end of the day. And that's, if you can just go to the next slide. So we've added a protocols constructor argument. So now when you're establishing your WebTransport session, you can see there, you can pass along the protocols you might want to talk, MOQT or Alan's chat, and then that can be negotiated with the server, and you can read the response and see what came back, or an error if there was no successfully negotiated protocol. So this is a sub protocol, not so much. We've got many layers of protocol, and there was a lot of debate over what to call this, but we called it protocols to be consistent. We've also adjusted the estimated send rate definition to exclude wireline framing. So it represents the rate at which an application payload might be sent. Or at least it's the user agent's best effort to represent the rate at which an application payload might be sent. Next slide, please. We've also, and this is quite a large change. So if you knew the API prior to issue PR 629, datagrams are all in one bucket. When you wrote datagrams, and you might be writing a set of datagrams that represent your audio and another that represent your video, there was no ability to alter the send priority between those two. So that's changed now. We created something called datagrams create writable. You can think of this as flows of datagram, parallel flows of datagrams to which you can assign independent send priority. And in fact, we're going to remove the singleton writable that was there. So WebTransport.datagrams.writable is going to go away with an upcoming PR. It's there today. And your access to writing datagrams will be through datagrams.createWritable. Next slide, please. And this, sorry for the lot of text in the pictures, but we thought a picture might help explain the prioritization. So the other big change was a change to try to accommodate, certainly from the mock side of the house or mock transport, the priority schemes that might want to be implemented. So you have a notion of send groups, and within a send group, you have a send order. The default send order is 0. It goes to plus 2 to the 32 minus 2 to the 32. So this example Higher priority is the vertical access. So everything, because no send group has been specified, you are thrown into the null send groups. You're in a everybody is in the same send group. And then the higher the send order, the greater your priority when you get sent. And it's not dictating, you can't change it after it's gone on the wire, but it's the rate at which, it's the order at which you're writing it to the wire. And you can see here we have control stream, and now we're able to have parallel flows of datagrams with different send orders. So this is an example of sending webcam and gaming data down the same, all in the same send group. So it's a strict ordering of everything that's being sent. If we go to the next slide. This shows what happens if you have two send groups. So we automatically have shared fairness between send groups. We could have had weighting, but there was not enough support for weighting. So the default weight is 1-to-1. If you define two send group A and B, they each get approximately half of the available bandwidth. And within those two groups, you can then control the send order of both your streams and of your datagrams. Hopefully this accommodates the majority of the prioritization use cases. Next slide is good. Just a can I use update of browser support. We're looking good in Chrome and Firefox. Firefox added support on Android, which is nice to see. We're just waiting on Safari and WebKit at this point. But we're getting certainly close to very usable penetration of available browsers. Next slide, please. So we wanted to go over some of the remaining issues. And these are actually, I had issued a slide update where we changed the order, but I'll just go with the order. That's the first one here. So is CORS preflight necessary for WebTrans if we add headers? So today, neither Chrome nor Firefox implement CORS preflight. There was some thought that Firefox did. It's been resolved that it does not. And it does not for both WebTransport and WebSockets. But today, we have no ad hoc headers. So if we allowed the application to send ad hoc headers, is there an opinion of anyone that CORS preflight then becomes necessary, or is it not necessary? I'll pause there in case there's opinion in the room on this one. We will not come back to this. Okay, nothing. We'll go to the next slide. This is another big contentious issue that is a blocker to us getting to candidate recommendation. There is a proposal to remove support for service certificate hashes, which is currently in the spec. I know it's a lot of it's a lot of text for one slide. If you look at the thread, it's ridiculously long. So we try to do our very best to summarize it here, and I don't expect everyone to read all of this. This is purely an opinion, or at least an outreach. People on both sides of this argument, I think, are in the room, and hopefully there's hallway conversations to be had. So our hope as chairs is that perhaps the hallway conversations could resolve or move us ahead on this issue of either agreeing to keep service certificate hashes for now, or coming up with a consensus around the need to remove them. Then let's go to the last slide. This was basically a request for support for adding headers. You can see an example API there. If you can add ad hoc foobar headers in your constructor and be able to read a response from the server, is this a capability that people desire? So far, there's been reasonable support online for this, but again, there's an opportunity to express additional supports here in the minutes. And just looking at the comments, yes, Martin, the cause question is tied to the header question. I don't think we'd be asking the cause question if we weren't asking the header question. Eric for Q.
Eric Kinnear, Apple. I'll chime in on this one. I don't have a super strong opinion, but this is a place where I'm a little bit more inclined to say, why not for letting people put headers on the connect request? If we don't, the very first thing people are going to send is going to be a pile of essentially headers right after the connect request. So unless we can find some reason why we don't think it is okay to put, I don't see any, I don't see any need to make everybody go build the same thing right afterwards, where you just do nothing until you've now exchanged your own little fun negotiation. We've got some, part of the reason that we did this was because we knew that setting these things up needed a bunch of key value metadata, and it's totally reasonable for applications to have their own metadata.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, initially, like, I wanted to comment that initially the reason we didn't put headers is we just looked at it and decided you can put the stuff in payload, and there are risks with exposing those headers to proxies. But the reason I changed my opinion is that if the headers are the nice thing about headers is that headers are basically, they have to be received before any of application data. And that is a nice property. So for instance, compare the way quick transport parameters and HTTP settings are currently implemented. In quick transport parameters, you get all of the parameters before you communicate any data, and that lets you do backwards incompatible extensions. Whereas HTTP settings, at least in traditional implementation, and that might partially change depending on like how we do flow control negotiation, but in traditional, like, they're sent asynchronously, so like you can process HTTP requests without settings. And that's why I think headers are useful for WebTransport, is that they let you pre-negotiate things before you even negotiate anything else.
Thanks, Victor. Martin?
I'm pre-minuting myself. If we allow headers, we should probably allow cookies. And if we allow cookies, we're falling into the cause question, I think. And at that point, I think we're engaging with fetch, and we're engaging with fetch at a much higher layer than we currently do. Right now, we're essentially maybe accessing the connection pool, maybe. Here, I think we would want to engage with all of the apparatus of fetch, with the sec dash prefix restrictions and all of these sorts of other things. So as much as I'm like, yes, Eric, this would be a great feature to have, and why not? The why not is, do you really want to go down that path? Because implementations right now are not pre-flighting, but under this, they probably should.
All right. So before Lucas goes, I'm going to say we're going to wrap up pretty soon. So if you have some short comments, get in the queue and we're going to lock it. But remember that we're not going to resolve this here. This is a W3C question. But all right, let's keep going. Lucas.
I'm going to let Victor respond. I feel like he might be responding to a point that was made.
Stand closer to the mic, Lucas.
Oh, that wasn't sarcasm.
Oh, no, yeah, we did not hear what you said. Sorry.
Sorry, let Victor go.
Can you put it in the chat? We're not hearing you.
Okay, I was going to just remark that one of the other motivations that we had is people often want to put their WebTransport, and they would put like load balancers that does authentication processing in the middle, so like HTTP authorization token. And they do that for HTTP, and they currently want to do it for WebSockets and WebTransport. And for various reasons, that's not supported in WebSockets, and people have been complaining about this for a long, long time. And
Okay. Thank you, Victor. Will, anything else?
No, that's it. We appreciate the time, and we will resume our work online. Thank you, Dan.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the presentations and the presentation. And to everyone, if you have thoughts, please bring them to the W3C GitHub. All right, then. Eric, is it you? Click. I will bestow upon you the clicker. Remember not to point it at anyone's eyes.
Thank you for that detailed safety briefing. All right, Victor, I've got your name in a couple of places on the slide, so feel free to jump in at any point. We are in an interesting position of not having a ton of open issues left. So let's talk about a few small things. The first one is hopefully a yes or no question. Subprotocol negotiation. In Quick, we made ALPN mandatory. We now have a way to stick some headers on the connect request that say, these are the protocols that I'd like to speak, and this is the set of available protocols. The WebTransport server can then say, this is the WebTransport protocol that I've chosen. Should that be mandatory? Should it not be mandatory? Summarizing the discussion on the issue so far, Victor has already shipped some code that makes it not mandatory. Feel free to chime in about that. That doesn't excite me that much, but I think the other point here does, which is that we already have a way to identify resources. It is plausible that somebody would not want to use this mechanism and could still figure out how to have a useful conversation over WebTransport. And that is a very different state than for Quick, where you can kind of do that with like port numbers, but that's much less common if you want to actually use that on the real internet. So I could always go to the WebTransport URI with /chat on the end, and I don't have to tell you that the protocol that I'm going to talk is chat, because that's what you do at /chat. That's what that resource does. So I see Martin's in the queue.
Victor is totally right. Do what Victor says.
Lovely.
Not always.
So what MT said, not on the mic, was not always. The question as chair is, didn't the W3C have a discussion of this? And if they decide they want this, we can't just not, if we remove it, we're going to have to talk with them.
Those people. Yeah, it was optional in the constructor too, right?
Oh, I see. So we're not suggesting removing the feature. We're saying making it optional. Sorry,
Yeah,
I misread that.
Yeah. So the no to the question here is it should not be mandatory. You should have the option to do this. If you specify that in JavaScript, then you get it here. If you don't, then what you specify in JavaScript is just /chat, and you have a nice day. So cool. All right. Are we taking some notes into the issue somewhere?
Yeah. Can you do that? All right. And just before we move on, I'm hearing consensus in the room to make the subprotocol negotiation optional. If anyone objects to that, please speak up now. Cool.
There's a handy link in here in the PDF to the issue if you want to add any extra thoughts, but I think a solid no is nice. Yeah, I can't click on it with the dot. Now for the fun one. So we've merged flow control. It's a thing. It's actually not super large. I've got a couple of bullets here because we keep having conversations about like, I don't really want to do it. And wouldn't it be simpler if I didn't? And if I didn't have pooling anyway, then why do I care? And I keep coming and this is an emotional journey of mine that you all are welcome to not join me on if you don't want. But I keep coming to the point of saying, okay, fine. Wouldn't this all be simpler if we just didn't? And then I come back to so when I have only so much ability to send data and I can't send all of it, do I want to choose? Do I want the browser to be able to choose, hey, the things that you're sending with WebTransport maybe take lower priority or higher priority than the other requests that are happening to that same origin or between multiple WebTransport sessions? Or do I just want to rely on somewhere in my AQM or my bottleneck or somebody else on the network to make those choices for me? And we then come full circle back around to saying, well, I guess we probably did want to give people the ability to make those kinds of decisions rather than just shouting things out into the network and seeing what happens. Popping up the stack a little bit, what I think that means here is that flow control is truly as optional as pooling. You need flow control in order to signal to people, hey, I'm not sending your thing right now, potentially because you're sending something else that's more important, potentially because somebody on the other end isn't consuming it, etc. Do we need an additional mechanism to negotiate this? So the proposal so far is to do yet another revision of the transport parameters that we use to negotiate WebTransport. Thank you. The settings that we use to negotiate WebTransport. Have the client send max sessions again. If either side says pooling is enabled or anything like that, then you have flow control. If anybody says no pooling, then no flow control. Obviously, if somebody says 0, then no WebTransport. Don't love it. It's not great. Could we just require it? I see we have a queue.
One more build, because that's your last build on this topic.
Conveniently, there are just 3 numbers in computer science: 0, 1, and not 1. The problem here is that you've just special cased 1. And I get that some people don't want to implement this, but it really isn't that hard. I know that Victor's going to say that it is that hard. I'm sorry, I just have to disagree with him. It's really not that hard. And I would prefer that everyone does the flow control than have the special case. I'm willing to accept this outcome here if that's where people go. It's not that much extra code to put it in, but I will remind people that these connections are going to be used for HTTP as well as WebTransport, and having some ability to control the amount that WebTransport can swamp the memory of your machine relative to the other stuff that's going on there is also kind of a little bit useful, depending to what extent you expect to be using that connection otherwise. So I'm in the this is okay, would prefer to draw a line through the no flow control option on this one. Obviously, flow control can be implemented in the 0 case relatively easily. So I don't think we've got too much concern there.
Thanks, Martin. Victor?
Yeah, I don't expect people to implement this protocol if we ship it that way, to be honest with you. Like, I am not sure that I can implement what's in the draft right now. I know, in fact, that the APIs like we expose to the browsers are not enough to implement this, for instance, because we require you to know things like reset offsets. And that is a niche. This is something I do not expect quick APIs to universally expose. And that is just like the top of the iceberg. There are like hundreds of ways you can get this wrong in a way that it works 90% of the time, and then you deadlock 1% of the time. And that happens with regular flow control. And now we have 2 layers of flow control, each of which can deadlock in its own wonderful way.
So just to recap, Victor, what you're saying is that if flow control is mandatory, you think people will not do web transport.
Yeah, basically.
Interesting take.
So what I'm hearing as chair is that this would be hard to implement in Chrome stack. So Victor doesn't want to implement flow control, but can live with it being negotiable, and other people can do it and Chrome won't. Martin, it's easy to implement in Martin's stack, and so Martin wants to do it. It's doable, but Martin can live with it being negotiable. So it sounds like everyone can live with it being negotiable. Eric, can you live with it being negotiable?
And now we have 15 standards.
Alan?
Alan Frindell. I wanted to Martin made a point about it's not just about how many web transport sessions are there, but also how many HTTP requests, which is actually controlled. There's not like a setting that tells you how many HTTP requests you can have. It's just how many streams you can make. So that's somewhat dissatisfying. But anyway, there's not that much browser traffic on the internet. Do what you want.
Oh, that's an easy solution. Kazuha?
All right, Kazuhoku. So I can see that the difference of complexity might not be that big if you look from the browser developer side. But if you look this from the proxy vendor's side or server vendor's side, the difference is much larger, because without flow control, it's basically just about passing through the data that's being sent over quick streams. Whereas if you have to do all the things. So I think there's a big difference if we think about having potential adoption.
So I actually have a question for you before you get too far away from the microphone. So if I were to be an intermediary and I'm passing H3 to potentially more than one H3 upstream, and one of them stops upstream, how do I keep the client that's sending me data from forcing me to buffer indefinitely?
Well, right. So forcing you mean the client?
Me, the intermediary.
Right, but you have the quick level flow control, no?
But I have a single quick connection to the client.
Right.
I have 3 web transport sessions on that quick connection. And I have 3 quick connections upstream to different places.
I see. Yeah, well, so it's not my business. I mean, like.
Gotcha. So the answer is don't do that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Doctor, it hurts when I poke myself in the eye. Then Victor?
Yeah, to Alan's comment about HTTP streams versus web transport streams, that is a good observation, but also I don't think flow control actually solves that problem, because at least from the browser perspective, like the browser still has to police its like subdivision of how many streams it lets the client open versus how many HTTP streams, because the server can just send indefinitely large values. And this is like this flow control is more about different speeds at which the backends of your proxy can consume things in different web transport sessions.
This flow control, so I'm just reading from the trend. This flow control is more about different speeds at which the backends of your proxy can consume things in different web transport sessions.
Yeah, because like...
Yep.
Victor, just so you know, the speakers are kind of pointed away from the front of the room, so we're having a little hard time hearing you.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me try to explain again. So the flow control is about telling your peer how much it can send. Here, the issue is that your session can be shared between different browser clients, but your peer is not necessarily responsible for patrolling that, because the peer will tell you that, well, this web transport session can handle a lot of data, and this web transport session can handle a lot of data, and all of your HTTP streams can handle a lot of data, but it's just as a client, you're opening too many of them. So the browser still has to like make sure that there are some limits that are not imposed by the server.
Processing that, I think the browser can certainly choose to limit what JavaScript is able to do more than what the server is willing to offer, sure. And servers who didn't want to do a lot of flow control could, rather than negotiating it as optional, just send some obscenely large values and not have to worry about it. That is also true.
Lucas?
Hello, can you hear me this time? Hello?
We still can't hear you at all.
No, no.
Oh,
nothing?
wait, there you go.
Okay. I'll try and keep it quick. Speaking as an individual, I had a lot of reservations when we talked about flow control like a year or two ago. In the meantime, I still continue to spend time in my day job fighting flow control. Alan posted one in the chat. I stumbled over that and spent 2 months of war clock time writing debug tools to figure out why web pages is randomly freezing up and really upsetting our customers. And only to gather the data to find this 10-year-old bug that Alan had already found, and it sat there doing nothing. Not because it was a protocol issue, not because someone wrote a bug or something, but because of the way it related to the consumption of the data that was being transferred over and how that interlinked with the media player. And it was like a hard problem that no one really had the bandwidth to work on. And how it worked by default was picked, and it kind of worked okay. And there's many workarounds you can do, and then it was easy to do that. Yeah, there's a fix now. Great, sure. We're going to pursue that and maybe get it fixed. But also in the process of that, we stumbled over a H3 flow control bug that would affect uploads to our server, which then we fixed with like one line of code. But the reproduction case is really gnarly. And I just think if there is a way to reduce the complexity here, it is going to benefit the deployment. That's what I would like to see.
Alan Frindell, I think so. I have not yet implemented flow control. I mean, it just landed in the draft, like at the deadline. So I think I might not be the only one. And I really want to put some time in between now and Madrid to do that, so I can weigh in kind of to Kazuho's point, to Victor's point, like how hard is this, and get my own sense of it, and maybe that might change my mind. So I don't know if the answer is we can punt until there's a little bit more or interop. Maybe we need to actually have interop experience with flow control for people who are going to do it, and maybe that will help us move forward from here.
So as chair, what I'm going to suggest is let's land a negotiation. We had consensus on that. We can discuss more now if this is the right negotiation or not, and then we will implement. If everyone finds flow control to be easy and great, and then maybe we remove the negotiation, make it mandatory. If everyone finds it impossible to do, maybe we rip it out entirely. But we will decide that after we've had implementation experience. But I'm going to say that we're going to make it negotiable now, and that way the implementers can do one or the other. And so the question for the room is going to be like thoughts on that and thoughts on this solution, knowing fully that we are completely able to revisit this after we have implementation experience.
I want
Go ahead, Victor.
I wanted to point out something about why simplicity of
Speak a little louder.
Okay, I want to point out something about why simplicity of deployment is important, which I feel like people often miss. Simplicity of deployment is one of the main points of WebTransport, because otherwise everything that WebTransport can do, you can already do by like running a quick stack over RTC data channel. You just need to like take some ICE, some SDP, some SCTP, and you layer quick on top of it. Like this is all technically possible, but no one really wants to do that. And the reason no one really wants to do that is that it's a lot of work and there are lots of things can go wrong. And one of the motivations behind WebTransport is to fix that. And I really don't want us to end up discovering that, well, we recreated something that's about as bad as the state of the world was before us.
So, Victor, what I'm hearing from you is that you don't want to deploy something that's hard to implement, but I think we will need to implement to know whether it's hard to implement. All right, Martin.
So if we do this, we're doing this, and we've committed to it. That's one of the problems with a number of the proposals here. The only option that I can imagine where we can unmake a decision is the one where we require that everyone implement flow control, and those who don't want to do it advertise a value of 2 to the 62 minus 1 immediately as soon as they start a session. That's the only way that I can see that we have a choice in the future. Otherwise, we're making a decision that we cannot unmake without defining a new protocol version or something along those lines.
Sorry, let me clarify. What I meant is deciding it now, cutting an implementation draft, having people implement, and then revisiting before working group last call.
Oh, that I'm okay with. Because we already have the mechanisms to cut a new version.
And we have an issue in the tracker to renumber all the code points to lower ones after working group last call.
Lower them by 1, you mean?
Repeatedly, and just doing that in a for loop up until we get one that fits in 1 byte.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So to clarify that, we're going to have an interop target draft very soon, and that will not be wire compatible with the RFC that we ship. That's a known fact, and so it'll give us the opportunity to fix this.
Gotcha. I kind of like your house of cards there, Victor. That's an interesting thing, but I'm with you on I don't really want anyone to ever ship that. I don't know that I see this as quite the same level of complexity as building your own quick stack in the browser and adding some ICE and doing a bunch of other things. But go for it. The only other thing that I think, if we were to have a let's reopen the pooling debate, I think flow control and pooling go together. So really the other option here is to declare that not good and reopen a lot of cans of worms. So do you want to do we want to have a repeat of this conversation in a couple of months and see if anybody's bothered to implement? That's kind of the proposal?
Well, it's more so assuming no one objects. Let's say we land this.
Yep.
Cut a draft. We'll confirm decisions on the list as usual, and then people implement, and then we will have a discussion in Madrid on what we learned during implementation. Specifically for
what I'm asking concretely is, are we all on the same page that flow control and pooling are tied together? If where we get to in Madrid is, no, we think this is actually too hard to do, not just it's optional, but we actually think it doesn't work, then...
Oh, I see what you're saying. So
if we think it's actually that hard, if we think that going through it, that there's a difference between it was kind of complicated and there may be some pain, which is its own very real piece of feedback. And then there's also the hey, Victor's statement that this is not implementable for me.
Yeah.
If we think that it is not implementable, then I think that...
Yeah. So if what we learned from implementing is that it's too hard no one can implement flow control or WebTransport, then we will rip out flow control and rip out the option to pool, is what you're saying at the same
that's what I'm saying,
time,
yep.
because that's the thing. Are we agreeing that you can't pool without flow control?
Spicy question.
Or that it's a bad idea, rather. Well, tell you what, I think we can cross that bridge when we get there. If it happens and we rip it out, we'll have the conversation then.
Sounds good.
Okay. The sense I'm getting is we're gonna move forward with writing a PR. Eric, might you be able to? Victor's been quite busy lately, and since I think
Sure.
thank you very much. All right, Ben.
Hey, I have no idea what's going on, but just at a glance, flow control for counting the number of WebTransport streams seems a lot easier than flow control for counting bytes. So I would just say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If there is if it turns out that part of this problem is too hard, maybe there's still like at least the the stream count limits might be worth keeping.
Okay, that's a fair point. If we decide that it's too hard, that'll be one of the options that we can discuss then.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And we already have max sessions as well, which is its own form of flow control there. So yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, last issue here. Things about final size. This is kind of what Victor was alluding to earlier when he was saying that, hey, I need my API to my quick API to tell me what some of the final size fields were when streams get closed. Right now we have a very small sentence here. We've got a task to editorially kind of beef that up and talk about it. I think the question that Victor was asking with my Victor hat on was, is this possible? Does this make sense? Are we okay with this? I'm perfectly fine punting this like we were talking about to Madrid and basically saying if it works for people, it works. The only piece that I think is maybe worth talking about before that is that does it have W3C implementation implications? Does it? My gut check was no. I think I see a behind a card MT also shaking his head. Cool. With that, we've cleaned up.
Actually, sorry, go back one. Just sorry. So I zoned out for a half second, and I need to call the consensus.
Okay.
I apologize.
No worries.
So repeat what
there's two questions on this slide.
Yep.
The first one is, are implementations comfortable with the requirement? And the proposal was to wait until Madrid, as we were saying, and see how it goes for them.
Yep.
Because that will be very informative of the, hey, it didn't work, or hey, it did. And the other one was, do we think it has W3C implications? And the thumbs up, down in the room sense was, no, it does not.
Okay.
So no action required. This becomes an editorial issue to beef up the text to make it pretty.
Great. Thanks. All right. Thank you.
Alan.
Alan Frindell. I'm just now, we seem to be pinning a lot of things on people implementing before Madrid, and I'm going to ask the chairs to execute an action item to schedule a virtual interop before then, because if people just kind of show up and wander off a plane, and it may not actually happen, and we may have to wait another 4 months. So
yeah, that's a very good point. I'll do well, actually I was going to do that because, are you done with H3?
Yes.
Cool. So if I look at our issue tracker for H3, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 issues. One is we'll renumber the code points when we're close to done. So that one will happen after this sequence. And then 2 of them, including this one, are editorial. And the other ones, we just had resolutions for all of them today. Go ahead, Kazuhome.
Right. So I just wanted to say that for those who think this is too complicated, they always have the option to send a max data of the maximum quick end and call it a day. So I kind of think that this can be just merged, and then we can make steps forward.
Okay. Yep. Thanks. Actually, since we're here very quickly, which of our editors wants the PR to make sub-protocol negotiation optional? Or actually, is that a PR or is it already optional? We should probably clarify one way or another. It's already optional. Okay, so we can close the issue then, assuming the list agrees. And then for this one, you'll take that one? Okay, thanks. Say it at the mic.
To David, I will take an action to double check on the sub-protocol thing too, in case there's editorial stuff that we need to make that very clear that it is optional.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, we'll assign both of them to you. And so as a reminder, there's an editorial PR assigned to Alan as well. And there's a PR to create an INA section assigned to MT. Yeah, I figured it'd be good to remind you in case it's a surprise. In fairness, it was assigned to you in last July, so it's understandable that you forgot. Do you think you'll be able to do it, or would you? Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Cool. All right. So that's our plan for H3. Ideally, editors, if we can get those in the near future, then we'll cut draft and folks can start implement, and then we'll start talking about a date for a virtual interop, because I think having a little bit of a deadline will help motivate all of us here. And we can agree on how far away that should be. All right, that's it for H3.
Both statements were true. There are a few remaining cleanup editorial issues open in H2. There are no design issues left in H2. Implement, test it. We had a little bit of fun at the hackathon this time trying to find folks that we could interop with for H3 and for H2. So I think some chair's assistance in kind of getting dates and times when everybody will be there and we can all interop would be really, really helpful. Other than that, that's the status. Alan.
All right.
Alan Frindell, it occurred to me, I don't know, I think a year or 2 years ago, I wrote a testing draft for WebTransport called Devious Baton. I don't know if that's still the most useful way to actually test that your WebTransport stack can do everything it's supposed to do. I don't know if somebody wants to put more time into thinking about what we're doing on top of WebTransport for this thing we're planning, but maybe we should.
That's a good point. Does
we have the Devious Baton test implemented, ready for interop.
Shout it into the mic if you don't mind.
That's great. And well, I was going to say for the minutes, state your name at the mic, but you're taking the minutes, so we're good. Awesome. Yeah, and so what I said, so for looking at H2, what Eric said is right. I'm seeing some PRs assigned to Eric and then some assigned to Victor. Victor, do you think you'll be able to get to these in a small number of days?
Let me look at, this is on the HTTP free draft, right?
Yeah, on H2. So the only one is the keying material exporters. It's
oh yeah, I can write that. Yeah, sure. It's
cool,
just
thanks.
adding a reference.
Yeah, it's cool, thanks. And then you have an editorial one to discuss the use outside the context of H2, but that one's not blocking for interops, so we can punt that one for later. Awesome. All right, thanks everyone. We're almost there. That's great. Next up, we have Ben. Ben, do you want to offer to present?
Something has gone wrong.
Should I click the pass slide control? All right, I'll click the pass slide control. There we go.
That's good. All right, thank you. This is a draft from myself and Yaroslav, who's actually there. So in retrospect, I think we got our choice of presenters. We made a poor choice here, but sorry about that. So this is my my mental model of what HTTP is. It's some kind of like abstract thing that sits on top of different versions, that sits on top of different transports. And I particularly want to talk to you today about HTTP 3. That's like that specific thing, which sits on top of Quick. And notably, between HTTP 3 and Quick, there's this line, an interface between Quick and HTTP 3. What is it that is actually happening at that line? Well, if you look at that interface and you go through the HTTP 3 specification, you can see that HTTP 3 does a bunch of stuff involving Quick. It uses Quick to do various things. And like those things are exactly what you would expect. And this is the WebTransport session interface, which is also no surprise, of course, because HTTP 3 is using Quick in the way you're expected to use Quick, and WebTransport session interface is modeling the Quick interface in the way that you're supposed to use Quick. So this, created, for me, this gave me a feeling like, what if we could just run HTTP 3 on top of the WebTransport session interface? In fact, actually, wouldn't that just be HTTP 3 again if we then ran WebTransport over Quick? So it turns out it's not quite that simple for a couple of reasons, but in particular, when trying to specify this and see, if this would work, it turned out that we needed a tiny shim layer. The reason we need this tiny shim layer is that HTTP 3 go away and also the datagram extension rely on the client and the server having consistent stream IDs. But WebTransport session interface doesn't expose stream IDs. And we can talk about that in more detail, but essentially there's no such thing as a stream ID in WebTransport. So in order to recapitulate, in order to make HTTP 3 work, we need to reestablish stream IDs. So we need to sort of shove those in after in the WebTransport stream. So here's an example of what it looks like for running HTTP 3 over WebTransport over HTTP 3. But this is using the abstract WebTransport session interface. So if you're doing WebTransport over HTTP 3, formerly, I guess, known as HTTP 3 transport, then you have that header. Now you have this little shim, which is just the stream ID, and then you have HTTP 3 stuff that would otherwise have gone directly on a quick stream. So you pay in total, I don't know, maybe 4 bytes at the beginning of a stream overhead for the layering. Once you've gotten to this weird idea, then other strange things become possible. One of the interesting things is that WebTransport is perfectly symmetrical. The session interface looks the same whether you were the WebTransport, we decided to call them dialer and listener, copying somebody's terminology from the HTTP working group. And so you can imagine that you can do this in the forward direction. You can have forward H3 over WebTransport, or you can switch the roles and have reverse HTTP 3 over WebTransport. So I hope I've convinced you that this is possible, but I may not have convinced you that this is useful. So let's talk about that. That, I think, is a harder question, but I hope to convince you that there is utility in defining this thing. Let me talk about an example that one particular use case that I like. Imagine that you're trying to set up a web server behind a firewall. maybe you're, for example, particularly concerned about DDoS. Maybe you're trying to minimize the number of different cloudish providers that you have to have contracts with. So you set up your backend and server, and you just want to run like a vanilla Nginx instance. Currently, you would need to somehow like maybe get a static IP, punch a hole in your firewall, and make yourself reachable by the HTTP gateway so that it can establish TCP or quick connections to you. But if we can standardize some kind of way to do reverse HTTP, and this would be one way, then your backend could reach out to the gateway, if you both support this protocol, establish that connection, and now the gateway can do, for example, DDoS defense, and also forward the remaining connections to you over this reverse tunnel. This is, oh, and on the right, here's a dream of what this could look like in an nginx.com. So the reason to put this up there is to say, this is why it's worth standardizing. If we standardize it, then it can potentially be embedded into open source software that's widely used software. It doesn't, there's nothing here that's proprietary to a particular CDN operator, for example. So that's one use case highlighted here, but I think there are actually a bunch of different potential use cases that fall out of this kind of capability. There's something that looks a little bit like quick on streams. There's something that looks quite a bit like an old-fashioned HTTP request proxy, but now with support for virtual hosting and running proxy services with different properties on different paths. There's a use case I mentioned, and also a somewhat similar problem where you have something like we have support now for proxying it with Mask and Connect. We can proxy TCP. We can proxy UDP connections outbound. We can proxy UDP connections inbound, but we can't proxy TCP connections inbound. SOX 5 can, turn TCP can. So we could sort of close that hole here. There are other kind of enterprisey uses for this. Actually, in the last presentation, or the first presentation, I just saw maybe another one, which is if you can authenticate WebTransport in without using certificates, using some kind of certificate hashes instead of PKI, then that you can put this on top and now use HTTP type architectures in situations where you actually want to just have pinned identities instead of PKI identities. There are a lot of details that are in this draft about exactly how this works, but it's a very short draft, actually, because it's a very simple idea. And these are some of the details that I like. There's some fun stuff with origin frames, but I think this is all potentially, open to change, and I don't think it's that important. Authentication is maybe the most interesting thing. This draft basically says, authenticate however you want. So I think, this is a 0-0, but we're looking to see if people are interested enough that we can move forward, and if so, where.
Thanks, Ben. Before we discuss whether this would be in scope for adoption or not, I'm going to open the floor for any clarifying questions, but more of a comments. Go at it, folks. Lucas.
Thanks for the presentation. I'll probably come.
Lucas, you're going to need a new microphone or something. We really can't hear you.
Okay, I'll be back.
All right.
Do you by chance have the wrong microphone selected? Because we hear more of our own echo than we hear of your voice.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening. Yeah. All right. How about this? You can jump in queue whenever that works again, Lucas. Piotr.
Piotr Sikora. I think this is especially the hidden origin is very good case. And we as IETF should work on that. I'm not sure I see the need for WebTransport to be used for that instead of HTTP or doing that, H2 or H3 or 2 layers.
Thanks. Alan?
Alan from Dell. I hadn't realized the thing about stream IDs until you mentioned it, Ben. And to what degree is that a blocker that it needs to be reopened? Because I think that it may have already sailed, at least on the browser side, although I'm not sure how important it is to get this working in a browser. Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah. As co-author, feel free.
Yaroslav Rosomaho. Yeah, Ben and I looked into that. We created the draft currently based on assumption that WebTransport is not providing us stream ID, and that's the reason why we introduced that small shim layer, which is essentially reinvention of stream ID. There are a few corner cases where that stream ID is needed, like go away, and also datagrams. Datagrams need to have something that would associate them with the stream, so we are reintroducing stream ID. Yes, it's actually issue number 1 in WebTransport repository, get rid of stream IDs. So probably we don't want to revisit it.
Okay, I think I misunderstood what the shim layer was for there. I will say I think this is interesting. I mean, I've seen at the HTTP workshop, we had a presentation of the long history of reverse HTTP. I think I'm convinced by this use case of hidden origins in particular as one that needs some solution. I haven't exactly made up my mind if I think this is the best solution for it or not. But I also, at least in one of my HTTP implementations, think I can implement this draft very quickly. And so I'm kind of interested to do it just to see what it looks like. And then finally is sort of now carrying the shield of QMux or formerly Quick on Streams. This is once you say you're going to do HTTP3 over WebTransport over HTTP2, you're right there. And so I'm hoping the people who have their outrage for Quick on Streams can bring it here and be consistent.
I feel like since we've done Mask, we've opened up the Pandora's box of turtles all the way down and this on that and this on that. And it's become our favorite hobby. It's kind of great.
Eric Kinnear. I was going to say 2 quick things. One, your point about Mask is very true. Private relay as shipping today is H3 over Quick over Mask over H3 over Quick over Mask over H3 over Quick over UDP over IP.
Yeah, way to tell the network operators deploy some more Mask into the network.
Bingo. So from that perspective, my initial gut reaction to you want to do what over WebTransport is maybe not as out there as my initial reaction was. The thing about stream IDs I think is really interesting because one of the places we've actually run into problems is that H3 has some interesting layering violations in the way that it makes assumptions about which quick streams are usable for something. And that works fine because we've said that H3 fully consumes the quick connection. And that has pushed us to do things like define new quick frames to exchange information with somebody on the other end of a quick connection. Because if we were to send that data on a stream, H3 is sad. So if there is a way to, on one hand, yes, we could argue like we should bring stream IDs along with us because that way it matches what Quick does, and we want WebTransport to look like Quick, and that would be great. On the other hand, propagating to more places of the world the ability to put dependencies like that on the exact ID of that stream is painful in some ways. That like even dumb things like we do in WebTransport, where you send a Sentinel value initially, you could send a stream ID initially, and that would allow you to work on any stream and you would still know what it was for. So
Thanks. Victor?
Yeah, so the thing about stream IDs is that we can't give you the actual Quick stream ID, and the reason for that is once your web transport section goes through an HTTP reverse proxy into the backend, the stream IDs will just not match on the other side. We considered fixing that by adding like web transport level stream IDs, and what we did is we filed an issue and asked if anyone wanted this, and nobody showed up, so we just closed it without stream ID. It is still like, if people believe this is useful and this is worth adding, I am perfectly fine with adding it because this is really simple to add. But like, if people document the need for this, like, just at least that's my perspective.
Thanks, Victor.
Thanks, Victor. So, I mean, to address that question a little bit separate from this, I do think that a case where this really comes up clearly is the datagram, is using datagrams with WebTransport, where not being able to connect to, not being able to associate datagrams with the stream because the streams are anonymous, kind of is inconvenient. And so I think a lot of datagram applications are going to end up, identifying their streams, making their streams not anonymous so that they can then connect their datagrams to streams. But I don't know that this has to be part of the core protocol, and I do accept that fixing this in the intermediaries would be quite challenging.
And just jumping in as chair, we're like, the design of stream IDs in WebTransport is something that we discussed a long time ago, and probably not a whole lot of appetite for changing that, especially when it can be trivially solved at the application in the shim above, if needed. MT?
Yeah. So I think to step back, the reverse HTTP thing, the hidden servers and whatnot, is a real thing. I don't want to see that work happen here. I want to see that work happen probably in its own working group, where we can talk about the range of possible solutions that might be used to achieve that goal. I think this is probably one of the worst possible options you could present, despite the fact that the work here is quite good and they've worked through all the problems and it's sensible. I think that deciding to go on top of WebTransport is bad, not because I have an objection to having more layers in the stack than is really necessary. Although that's a small part of this, right? You could just put this. You could put HTTP on top of Quick in reverse, right? Pretty straightforward. UALPN, flip it around, done.
Yeah, I wrote a draft that does that.
Exactly. You've written all the drafts for all the things, Ben. So and that's probably the most sensible thing to do for the use case that's described. You got a firewall, you want to get through the firewall, you make a connection to a particular instance. You don't get some of the nice addressing of your URIs and whatnot, but fine, whatever. But I think I would rather see us try to get to the minimum number of layers necessary to achieve the goal, so that then we can layer it on top of mask, on top of mask, on top of mask, on top of mask, right? And burn the MTU that way. So the main reason that I think this is potentially problematic, and it may be a reason that you think is good, is I don't want to be in a position where I'm running web servers in browsers. I know that sounds like a thing that people want to do sometimes, but it's part of our contract with the people who put it on their machines that they don't get random web servers running on their browsers, and particularly for people who are concerned about running it in, say, enterprise networks where the machine has access to confidential information and would rather it not sort of have new ways to get out. So that's something that I'm a little bit concerned about there.
Thanks, MT. Kazuham?
Kazuho, I think we all agree that there's a real use case for these things. And I think one of my comments is like, have you compared this approach to setting up an HTTP3 connection, then sending the request in the reverse? Because that's another option.
So, I think that the main comparison I have is that I tried that and it didn't get accepted. So I thought I would try this instead. Mm-hmm. But I do, having done it, having thought through the question both ways, I do appreciate the flexibility, especially of HTTP authentication here. Yep. Because it is very unclear how to authenticate a HTTP over QUIC in reverse. And it's very convenient and straightforward here. Martin mentions MTLS. Okay, then you have to figure out what certificates do you use with MTLS. Do you client authenticate with a WebPKI server certificate, right. Or and if so, what does it mean?
Thank you. I agree that having the ability to use HTTP authentication is one of the benefits of this design. So thank you.
All right, everyone ready to find out if Lucas's microphone works?
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Hello. Okay, let's try this. I missed some of the discussion, so I apologize. I get a feel that Martin and Kazuo kind of touched on some of the points I'll make. So I apologize if I repeat them. As I've said in previous sessions where Ben's presented this work, there are like use cases of this kind of thing. Like they do exist, and it would be nice to maybe have a standard, but I don't know. Like what the way that Cloudflare does this works for Cloudflare, and that's nice. Are those folks or my colleagues interested in working on this? I've not had the kind of the bandwidth to engage in that discussion because we keep having kind of this different ideas, different ways we could do this, taking feedback from people, going back to the drawing board, coming back, and it's kind of which working group might it fit in, and it's kind of not clear. So based on what Martin said, I kind of feel like it is a case of like maybe this needs its own working group to ask those questions. What's in scope? There's lots you could do here, and it's all really cool. There will no doubt be people who want to run something in their browser that lets them do something more like peer-to-peer. And it's those scoping questions, I think, at least for me as an individual, that we're finding hard to answer when the discussion is kind of in the context of some drafts and stuff. And there's lots of ideas. I think having a bit more time to ask the bigger questions there might help us, because I think that if we can get people in the room, proxy vendors, origins, people who are building the gateways that Ben had up on his diagram, like they're not necessarily in WebTransport, or they're not in Mask at the time that we're meeting. So yeah, that's as much as I've got to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Lucas. So I put myself in queue to say as an individual that I also totally agree with the use case, but that I'm not sure if this is the right technical solution. I'll have to think about it more. And actually that segues into the point that I was going to make as chair. So what I'm hearing from the room is that there's definitely interest in this problem space. And no one has stepped up to say, no, we shouldn't work on this topic. However, even if everyone agreed this was the right solution, building something on top of WebTransport is not in the charter of WebTransport as it is today. And I'll look at Mike and see if he's going to nod or not, but I suspect that we won't recharter this group until we've shipped WebTransport. Yeah, I see Mike nodding. So what I and kind of I was on a thread with Yaroslav, Ben, and a few other people talking about this, and I think we managed to list about 12 drafts that about reverse HTTP. I think 7 of them are by Ben. There's a lot of ways you can do this, and that's kind of probably the hard part is picking one. But so anyway, we're not going to call for adoption in this working group. It doesn't quite make sense. I would recommend to the authors this topic has been discussed in HTTP, but it didn't seem like there was appetite to build it in HTTP. So this is probably something that I would recommend following the process that we did for Mask, which was we had a separate thing, a side meeting, then a BOF, a working group, and then eventually all of the Mask work will be kind of owned by the HTTP-based working group. And I suspect we will close Mask at some point. And so similarly, if this were to happen, that's how I would see it most successful. So that's what I would recommend for the proponents. All right, I think that brings us to the end of our session. So we talked about the plan for interop. And do we have any closing words from our outgoing AD or incoming AD?
David, I just wanted to thank you for all the work you've done in the working group. You're also going to be stepping down as chair, as you said in the beginning, and I wrote it in the mailing list, but I also wanted to say it here. Thank you for the fantastic work you were with the working group from the beginning, and also thank you to Nidhi and Lucas for picking up this. So thank you very much, and welcome, Mike.
Thanks, and thank you, Francesca, for being our AD for most of the existence of this group. Well, actually, on that note, I forgot to say, I chatted with Mike. I might stay a little bit longer as chair since we're like close to done. So we'll see. More to follow later. No, I jinxed it. All right. That's all, folks. Thanks, everyone. And see you in the PRs on the GitHub and on the list. Oh. Oh, wow. Oh, the COVID days that I couldn't get a haircut. Damn. Yeah. Yeah, well, I stopped shaving when COVID hit. I really did. Oh, thanks. Did you put that together? Oh, thank you. That's really cool.
I just wanted to say a little thank you because I think David was the one who first introduced me to the IETF and introduced me to everyone in this community. And so, yeah, coming on as a new chair, and then I guess you're staying though, but, but just wanted to say thank you so much for guiding and encouraging and all the work you've done for this group. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, I think now I need to leave because we've had such a good eulogy for me. I can't stay on.
And yeah, I just like to add, you know, there's a chapter has turned, and I'm very positive for the future. I've got big steps to step into to help this work. I think we've come a very long way on this, and I'm super excited for what WebTransport can do in terms of providing a very fundamental capability, building something that people really want. So I want to thank Bernard and David and Francesca and everyone who's been involved in getting to this point, but remind people there's still work to do. So, please, you've got PRs assigned to you. Do the work. We will follow up about a virtual interim or interop event, and I think that'll be an excellent chance for me as a new chair to come in and get more hands-on, get up to date with something like the devious pattern, and do those kinds of things. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Lucas. can tell which ITFs were in the middle of the night.
And per previous conversation, new AD as of yesterday, I've issued my first discuss. Let me know if I have my first working group chair to dismiss.
That was way too fast, Mike.
I was sustaining Francesca's discuss. Otherwise, the document would have gotten it.
Yeah.
Because the AD who discussed
Yep.
it-
Yeah, fair. Oh, I'm definitely sending that slide to my wife.
Sorry, I didn't slide to it there.
Yes, actually, now perfect. Yeah, I know.